Have you ever stopped, just pause to think about how often the really profound lessons, the insights that actually change things, aren't laid out neatly in some textbook?
Yeah, it's true.
Instead, they're kind of scattered, like shiny bits across time, different feels, different cultures. Maybe it's a speech from 100 years ago, nobody talks about it anymore, or some ancient philosophy, or even a scientific discovery that seems totally unrelated.
Like hidden gems almost.
Exactly. Hidden gems, just waiting for someone to connect the dots and see what they're really worth. Welcome to the deep dive. And, well, that's pretty much what we're setting out to do today.
It's a really exciting idea, I think. For this deep dive, we've pulled together quite a mix of material. I mean, we're looking at everything from ancient Greek thinking on persuasion right through to historical speeches that really sparked change,
Mhm.
and modern research on, say, human vulnerability, and even some surprisingly practical advice on, believe it or not, getting rich ethically. It's a real tapestry of ideas. Our job is to try and weave them together somehow.
Precisely. And our goal isn't just to, list facts. It's to really sift through this stack, pull the most important bits, the nuggets of knowledge, and maybe most importantly, connect ideas that, at first glance might seem totally separate.
Worlds apart, yeah.
We want you to leave not just feeling like you learned something, but genuinely inspired, maybe with some surprising facts, some actionable insights you can actually use on your own journey, whatever that might be.
And I think what often gets missed and what we really want to highlight today is that the real power here isn't just about grabbing new info. It's seeing how these sort of universal principles, about success, communication, finding your purpose, acting with integrity, how they show up again and again across different times, different fields. It's about appreciating the unexpected richness in this variety and understanding that real insight, genuine understanding often comes from pulling together these broad, sometimes maybe even conflicting viewpoints. So yeah, let's really dig in.
Okay, let's dive right in with something pretty provocative, actually. This comes from Russell Herman Conwell. Now, he was a Christian minister, which makes his stance even more striking. He basically says, I say that you ought to get rich, and it is your duty to get rich.
Wow, okay. That's bold.
It is, isn't it? For a lot of people, that probably sounds, well, counterintuitive, maybe even a bit shocking.
Mm.
But he doesn't stop there. He argues that to make money honestly is to preach the gospel. I mean, that just completely flips the usual script about wealth and spirituality.
It absolutely does. And Conwell knew it was controversial. He talks about that societal prejudice directly. He tells the story about a theology student at Temple University, which Conwell actually founded, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And this student was just appalled by the idea. He quotes the usual line, money is the root of all evil.
Right, the common interpretation.
But Conwell, he counters this very pragmatically. He suggests that honest wealth isn't just okay, it can actually be a force for good. He argues that earning money honestly can make a man temperate, anxious to have a good name, and industrious.
So the pursuit itself builds character.
That's the implication, that chasing ethical success, encourages virtues like hard work, responsibility, keeping a good reputation. It refines you rather than corrupting you.
That's a really interesting reframing, almost turns the common wisdom on its head. And I think his most famous example of this, the one people really remember, is the Acres of Diamonds story. Can you tell us about poor Ali Hafed?
Ali Hafed. Yes, it's such a classic parable for a reason, isn't it? A really powerful metaphor for, well, missing what's right in front of you. So Ali Hafed was this wealthy Persian farmer, pretty content, apparently, for a while, until he heard these stories about amazing diamond mines somewhere else. He gets consumed by this desire for more, convinced that real wealth is out there, far away. So what does he do? He sells his farm, leaves his family, and wanders the globe looking for these mythical gems.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It doesn't end well. He faces poverty, starvation, and eventually just gives up in despair. Dies by suicide, never finding the diamonds he sought.
That's tragic.
It is. And the real kicker, the terrible irony, is that the man who bought Ali Hafed's farm, one day he's watering his camels in a stream on the property and notices a shiny stone. Turns out it's the first of what they discover are literally acres of diamonds right there, on the land Ali Hafed sold.
Unbelievable. Right under his nose the whole time.
Exactly. And Conwell's point is profound. Ali Hafed became poor not because he lost his farm, but because he was discontented. And discontented because he feared he was poor. He was sitting on a fortune but couldn't see it because his focus was elsewhere.
Wow. That just hits hard, doesn't it? Makes you really stop and think about what opportunities, what acres of diamonds you might be overlooking in your own life, your own work. We're always looking for the next big thing, maybe the greener grass.
When sometimes the greenest grass is right where you're standing.
Yeah.
And Conwell backs this up with other examples, showing it's not just a story. He mentions a Pennsylvania farmer who sold his land cheap, only for oil to be discovered there later. A massive fortune gone.
Wow.
And another one, a Massachusetts professor of mineralogy, someone who should know better, right, sells his family home without realizing it sat on a huge block of native silver. 8 inches square, Conwell says. In both cases, huge wealth was right there, literally beneath their feet. But they didn't see it. Maybe they lacked perception, or maybe they just assumed opportunity had to be somewhere else, require some grand adventure.
So it's not just about what's physically present. It's about your ability to see it, to value it, to do something with it. And that ability to see a need and fill it seems central to Conwell's practical business advice. He tells this story about his father's country store. It's kind of funny, but also really pointed.
The jackknife story.
That's the one. Young Conwell's working there, and customer after customer comes in asking, "Do you keep jackknives?" And what does he do?
He just says, "No, we don't keep jackknives," and whistles a tune, right? Completely uninterested.
Totally. Doesn't care at all. What was he missing there?
He was missing, according to Conwell, the absolute bedrock principle of business success, which, incredibly, Conwell equates with godliness. He says, the foundation of godliness and the foundation principle of success in business are both the same precisely.
That's a strong statement.
It is. And the core idea is incredibly simple. Understand what people need and then supply it. He contrasts his younger self's indifference with the store owner who don't know and don't care about his neighbors. That owner is doomed, Conwell says, because real ethical success comes from serving others. Find their need, meet it. It's like a kindness you perform, and you get rewarded, and it's your duty, he argues, to take that reward and use it for more good. It's a very active, service-oriented view of prosperity.
That's a powerful case against just being passive in business, isn't it? Empathy as a core strategy. Now, shifting just a bit, Conwell also had some really strong opinions about inherited wealth. He calls it a curse. That's pretty controversial, too. How does he explain that? What's the danger?
He's very clear. The moment a young man or woman gets more money than he or she has grown to by practical experience, that moment he has gotten a curse. His view is that getting money without earning it, without the discipline and experience that comes with building something yourself, is actually harmful.
Harmful how?
He argues it deprives people of the really valuable things in life, things learned through struggle, through effort, through building character. He says leaving children things like education, Christian and noble character, a wide circle of friends, an honorable name is far, far better than just leaving them cash. Money without the character to manage it, without the hard-won experience, is ultimately destructive, he thinks. It's about the journey of earning, not just having the money land in your lap.
I can definitely see that logic. Without the struggle, maybe there's no real understanding of value or how to handle it responsibly. The source even mentions a story about one of the Vanderbilt sons, right, who actually rejected his father's fortune. That really drives Conwell's point home.
It's a perfect illustration. The son asks his incredibly rich father if he earned all his money. Vanderbilt says, yes, started on a ferry boat, 25 cents a day. So the son says, okay, I don't want your inherited money. I want a job on a ferry boat too. He finds one, $3 a week. Because he understood, as Conwell puts it, that the discipline of a poor boy that is worth more than a university education to any man. Conwell really laments that rich parents often shield their kids from work, see it as a social disgrace. He says this creates these lily-fingered, sissy sort of boys, and he has no pity for them because they miss out on essential life lessons.
It's a stark reminder, isn't it? True wealth isn't just dollars and cents. It's character, resilience, the dignity of work. And speaking of seeing needs and meeting them, Conwell has these fantastic examples of innovation coming straight out of everyday life. Like the toy maker from Hingham, Massachusetts.
Oh, that's another great Acres of Diamonds story, but so relatable. This poor guy out of work, his wife tells him to get busy. He's sitting there kind of whittling a wooden chain for his kids. They immediately start fighting over it.
A need identified.
Exactly. A neighbor sees this, suggests making toys to sell, but the guy is smart. He realizes he needs to know what kids actually want, so he asks his own children, what do they want? Doll beds, carriages, washstands. He has no money for good wood, so he uses firewood. Painstakingly carves these strong, unpainted Hingham toys.
And they took off.
Big time. They became famous worldwide for being sturdy and simple. And this guy, starting with just a penknife and listening to his kids, became, according to the story, the richest man in old Massachusetts. Made a fortune in 34 years. The principle. Simple. One must judge that what his own children like at home, other people's children would like in their homes, too. It's about scaling that personal insight.
That's just brilliant. It's pure empathy, isn't it? Seeing a local specific need and realizing it might be universal. That's basically the heart of good product development, even today.
Absolutely. And there's a similar story from New Britain, Connecticut. A woman gets totally frustrated with fiddly collar buttons, declares, "I'm going to get up something better than that." Her husband apparently laughed at her, said she didn't have brains enough to invent anything.
Oh, dear. Famous last words.
You bet. She persevered, invented the modern snap button. Simple, elegant solution to an everyday annoyance. Invested in factories, got incredibly successful. Eventually, she's traveling in her private steamship and takes her husband along for the ride.
Perfect.
It just perfectly illustrates Conwell's point again. Responding to a real human need, however small it seems, can lead to a great fortune. Conwell sums it up so well. The great inventor sits next to you, or you are the person yourself. He says the truly great person is often just a plain, straightforward, everyday, common-sense man whose greatness is so simple, so practical that nobody around them even recognizes it. They're like Ali Hafed's neighbors, maybe just don't see the diamonds right there.
So many fantastic points there about spotting external opportunity, about perception. But it's so clear, isn't it, that our ability to even see those opportunities, let alone act on them, is hugely shaped by our inner world, our mindset. It's not just passive, it actively shapes our experience.
Definitely.
Tony Robbins, for example, talks a lot about the power of state, how our performance, our success is directly tied to our neurophysiological state at any given moment. It seems obvious in a way, positive states lead to better outcomes, negative ones lead to failure.
Right, but what's really key in Robbins' framework is that these states aren't just random. He breaks it down. He says they come from our internal representations, basically, how we visualize things, how we interpret events, the stories we tell ourselves, and our physiological conditions.
Like posture, breathing.
Exactly. Posture, muscle tension, breathing patterns. These things combine with our beliefs and past experiences to literally dictate how we respond, how we behave. But, and this is crucial, Robbins insists we can consciously change these states. One big tool is reframing. Deliberately changing how we interpret an experience. So if something bad happens, instead of seeing it purely as a misfortune, you reframe it. You look for the hidden advantage, the lesson learned. By changing the meaning, you change your emotional response, your state, and ultimately your actions. You choose a more empowering perspective.
So you're taking control of the narrative inside your head, basically, shifting perspective to shift reality. And Robbins really pushes beyond just thinking, doesn't he? He's huge on action.
Oh, absolutely. He quotes Thomas Huxley saying, "The essence of life is not merely knowledge, but action." For Robbins, success isn't some endpoint you arrive at. It's an ongoing growth process. And that process demands action. Consistent, decisive action. Thinking about it isn't enough.
Right.
Plus, he points out that our beliefs act as filters for our perceptions and direct commands to our nervous system. This is huge because he follows up by saying these beliefs can be changed through new experiences and learning.
So it's dynamic, not fixed.
Exactly. It implies this continuous cycle of learning, acting, maybe failing, but then taking responsibility. Great leaders, he says, don't see failure as the end. It's just feedback, data telling you to adjust your actions, maybe even challenge your underlying beliefs.
If you're not moving, you're not really learning or growing. And Les Brown adds another layer here, doesn't he? He talks about commitment, how until one is committed, there's hesitance, the chance to draw back, always ineffectiveness. He says boldness has genius, power, and magic in it.
That resonates so strongly with Robbins' call to action, doesn't it? But Brown connects this need for commitment to his idea of unconscious incompetence.
What do you mean?
Basically, we don't know what we don't know. You can't commit to fixing something or learning something if you're not even aware that you're lacking it or that the thing even exists.
Like you're bad at something but don't even realize you're bad at it.
Precisely. Imagine someone, say, who constantly pushes people away but has never heard of emotional intelligence. They don't know what they're missing, so how can they commit to developing it? Brown's point is that self-awareness, knowing your blind spots, is the absolute first step. You can't act effectively, you can't commit boldly until you know what you're dealing with inside yourself.
That makes total sense. This whole dive into the inner world naturally leads us to Brené Brown and her work on vulnerability. which is fascinating because she kind of stumbled into it, didn't she? She was studying connection, but people kept talking about shame and heartbreak.
Yeah, her journey is fascinating. And what she found was really counterintuitive for a lot of people. She discovered that vulnerability is the core of all emotions and feelings, and not just the difficult ones. She says it's the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity.
So, not weakness at all.
Quite the opposite. Her research suggests is actually our greatest strength, the path to real connection. She also talks about the really damaging shame-blame connection, how blame is driving, shame is riding shotgun.
Meaning blame is often a way to discharge shame.
Exactly. She says blaming and finger-pointing are often symptoms of shame. And what comes from blame? Hurt, denial, anger, and retaliation. It's this downward spiral that just pushes people further apart.
It's such an insidious feeling, shame. That feeling of not being worthy of connection. So, what does she say is the antidote? How do we deal with it?
The cure, she argues, lies in language, in speaking it. She says shame derives its power from being unspeakable. If we cultivate enough awareness about shame to name it and speak to it, we've basically cut it off at the knees.
So bringing it into the open diminishes its power.
Exactly. Finding the courage to share our stories, our imperfections, to be seen, really seen, that's what heals shame.
And she offers this vulnerability prayer, maybe a reframing that I find really powerful. It's moving away from that common question, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail?
Right.
And shifting instead to, what's worth doing even if I fail? That just changes everything, doesn't it? It's not about hypothetical safety nets anymore.
It's a critical shift because it moves courage away from being dependent on the outcome. It roots bravery in your values, your purpose. What matters enough to you that you'll show up and try, even knowing you might fall flat on your face, get criticized, or heartbroken.
So the act of trying itself is the win.
In a way, yes. Brian says the willingness to show up changes us. It makes us a little braver each time. It's about the internal transformation that happens when you dare, when you're vulnerable for something you believe in, regardless of whether you succeed in the conventional sense.
Okay, from embracing vulnerability, let's broaden out to meaning and purpose with Viktor Frankl. His book, Man's Search for Meaning, drawing on his experiences in concentration camps. It's just incredibly profound. He talks about the ability to say yes to life with all its tragic aspects, suffering, guilt, death.
Frankl's wisdom is just immense, isn't it? Forged in the absolute worst conditions imaginable. His core insight is that finding meaning isn't just nice to have, it's essential for survival, for overcoming suffering. He literally observed people giving up, developing a fatal giving up pattern when they lost their sense of purpose, felt their lives had no meaning left.
So meaning is protective.
Deeply protective. His work shows it's fundamentally the attitude that is taken toward the various challenges and opportunities of life that defines our experience. It allows for a kind of internal freedom, even when external freedom is totally gone. It's about finding purpose in any circumstance, which is just incredibly empowering.
And Elie Wiesel, another voice forged in profound suffering, adds this idea of moral perception involving the other. He says it's not what's good for me, but what's good for you. He even applies this to really tough issues, like abortion, stressing the need to avoid hostility and debate.
That's such a vital point, especially today. How do we approach these deeply divisive issues, political, ethical, whatever, with compassion, with an attempt to understand rather than just hostility? Wiesel reminds us, every human being is a universe in himself. Every situation, every person deserves to be looked at as a special and unique case.
It's a call for nuance, really. Moving beyond labels and ideologies to see the person.
Exactly. Profound empathy and respect for the individual.
Now, stepping back a bit, the Stoic philosopher Seneca offers a really interesting, maybe even challenging take on joy. He contrasts pleasure, which he sees as a vice fleeting, potentially harmful, with true joy.
What's his definition of joy?
He calls it an elation of spirit, of a spirit which trusts in the goodness and truth of its own possessions. He warns that the common fleeting pleasures are often just the beginnings of sorrow to come. True joy, Seneca says, never ceases and never changes into its opposite. That's a high bar.
It's a very different model of happiness than our modern focus on chasing pleasant experiences, isn't it? He's distinguishing between that surface-level gratification, the kind that fades and leaves you wanting more, and a deep internal contentment, something rooted in your character, your choices, your virtue.
He uses that analogy of life as a play, right?
Yeah, famously. It is with life as it is with a play. It matters not how long the action is spun out, but how good the acting is. Quality over quantity. Virtue over duration. And very stoically, he even says dying is also one of life's duties, suggesting that accepting life's natural course is part of living well, part of that internal peace.
And then bringing a way forward, Kurt Vonnegut shares his Uncle Alex's motto, which I just love for its simplicity. If this isn't nice, what is?
Oh, that's great.
Isn't it? It's just this immediate call to pause, to notice the good things, the rewarding moments right now, instead of always looking ahead for some bigger happiness. It feels like a very practical echo of Seneca, actually finding that internal joy just by choosing to see it in the everyday.
Mhm.
Okay, so we've explored the inner world, finding purpose, building character. Now, how do we take that and connect with others? How do we influence, persuade, lead? Let's dive into the art of influence, starting way back with the ancient roots of rhetoric. Aristotle's rhetoric, he calls it a counterpart to dialectic, and defines it really simply as the power to discover whatever is persuasive in speech.
That definition is so important because it frames rhetoric not as manipulation necessarily, but as discerning what's true, or at least plausible, and presenting it well. Aristotle lays out the main tools: example and enthymeme.
Enthymeme.
Yeah.
Remind us what that is again.
It's basically a logical argument where the audience fills in a missing piece, usually a common belief or assumption. Think of slogans. A diamond is forever. The implied premise the audience supplies is you want things that last forever, especially symbols of love.
Got it. So the audience participates in the persuasion.
Exactly. Examples, of course, are more straightforward: past events, stories, analogies, fables. He also talks about how virtues themselves are persuasive, categorizing goods, virtues of soul, body, wealth. And interestingly, how a speaker can kind of reframe qualities. Like someone overcautious could be painted as cool and calculating, or someone rash as courageous. Depends on your goal.
That sounds pretty pragmatic, almost cynical maybe, but you can see how effective it would be.
Yeah.
And Aristotle also mentions justice in arguments, right?
Yeah.
Which feels very relevant today.
He does. He says it's important to consider whether the sufferer deserves to suffer and whether the doer has a right to do. It encourages looking at both sides, understanding the complexities before rushing to judgment. Centuries later, Cicero built on this, saying a great orator needed more than just speaking skills, maybe even experience of the art of war,
Wow. Why war?
maybe for strategic thinking.
Hmm.
But Cicero stressed that the orator's worth and wisdom, their character, their integrity, were just as vital as their technical skill. It wasn't just about the words, it was about the person behind them. That theme echoes down through the ages.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Quintilian, another Roman thinker on rhetoric, gets into specific tactics for refuting arguments. He talks about denying a charge, rebutting it, defending it, or even just making light of a charge with wit.
He gives some great examples, too, like Manius Curius, who saw this painting depicting him naked in prison or being bailed out by friends for gambling debts. His only reaction, did I never win then?
Huh. That's brilliant. Deflects with humor.
Totally. Or the Roman knight accused by the emperor of wasting his inheritance, who just replies, I thought it was my own. It shows the power of wit, perspective, psychology, and argument. But Quintilian also makes a really key distinction between ethos and pathos.
Ethos being character, pathos being emotion.
Right. Ethos is about the speaker's perceived character, their goodness, consistency. It builds trust over time. Pathos is about stirring emotions in the audience, often more momentarily. And Quintilian strongly believed ethos was paramount. He says it is commended to our approval by goodness more than aught else. Your credibility, your perceived moral standing is foundational.
So it's not just what you say or how, but who you are perceived to be. That link between character and credibility feels absolutely central.
It is. And what's really interesting here, connecting back to deeper philosophy, is Quintilian's critique of earlier rhetoricians. He accused them of having divorced rhetoric from justice and preferred plausibility to truth. He's echoing Plato's concerns from the Phaedrus. For Quintilian, an orator had a moral duty.
A duty beyond winning.
Yes. A duty to refuse to help clients pursue base and inhuman gratification of his rancor. He even mentions Pericles, the great Athenian leader, who apparently used to pray that no word might occur to his mind that could give offense to the people. It emphasizes self-restraint, aiming for the public good, not just scoring points.
Which brings us right to Socrates and Plato's critique of rhetoric. In Plato's Gorgias, Socrates really goes after the sophists, doesn't he? Calling their rhetoric just an unsystematic knack, based on belief, not real knowledge.
He does, and he makes this radical claim that someone who truly knows right and wrong will never wish to do wrong. It connects knowledge directly to virtue and speech.
And his most famous line from that dialogue.
that doing wrong is not only more shameful than suffering wrong, but also, in the same degree, more harmful to the doer. It's a massive ethical statement. It completely reorients where the real harm lies, not in what happens to you, but in what you do, in compromising your own integrity.
So did Plato just condemn all rhetoric?
Not exactly. He condemned its misuse, prioritizing persuasion over truth, victory over justice, like the sophists did. But in the Phaedrus, he acknowledges a true rhetoric. One, as Quintilian agreed, that's impossible without the knowledge of justice. And Plato himself wrote powerful speeches, like the Apology of Socrates. So rhetoric used for truth and moral purpose, that was different. It's about the intent, the ethical foundation.
Intent and foundation.
Okay.
Now let's jump way forward to modern times. Simon Sinek has captured something similar with his hugely influential idea of starting with WIY. He argues real inspiration, real impact comes not from what you do or how you do it, but from having a clear purpose, a compelling WIY. He uses Apple as a key example.
It's such a clear and powerful concept. Sinek points out that Wozniak and Jobs weren't just selling computers. Their YY was bigger. They wanted to make an impact, to challenge the way people perceived how the world worked. That deeper purpose resonated. It attracted passionate followers, not just customers.
And you contrast that with
companies like TiVo. Amazing technology. Lots of buzz among early adopters. But they struggled to cross over into the mainstream. Why? Sinek argues they didn't know how to talk to them. They had the what and the how, but no clear, inspiring why for the average person to connect with. He also mentions Microsoft having a loose sense of WHY after Gates left, showing how vital that core purpose is.
So the why is like the soul of the thing, whether it's a company or a movement or even just your own life.
Yeah.
And Dale Carnegie gives us a great human example of influence with that story about Charles Schwab. Paid $1 million a year back then, which was insane.
Okay.
And not for his steel knowledge, right?
Right. Schwab himself admitted others knew more about steel production. His secret, he said, was purely his ability to deal with people. Carnegie highlights this as a timeless truth. It just underscores how crucial human connection, empathy, interaction are, even in technical fields.
Which loops back nicely to Tony Robbins again.
Exactly. Robbins emphasizes that knowledge alone is insufficient, action and effective communication are crucial for results. And he connects communication outward with communication inward, how our inner dialogue shapes experiences and emotions. So effective influence starts with managing your own state, your own internal conversation, to align with what you want to achieve externally. It's both an internal and external game.
Okay, this brings us to our final segment, focusing on the power, often the difficult power, of principled action, people challenging the status quo, often against huge odds. Let's start with Sojourner Truth in her incredible Ain't I a Woman speech. The way she describes her strength plowed and planted and gathered into barns, and no man could head me. And then the sheer injustice born 13 children and seen them most all sold off to slavery.
Wow.
Just devastatingly powerful.
It's incredibly raw and direct, isn't it? And what's so piercing is her observation that men speaks up for one another, but are so unwilling to let women speak, especially Black women. She cuts right through the hypocrisy of a system that denies women their basic humanity, despite their undeniable contributions, their strength, their suffering. Her simple questions just demand recognition. She's this embodiment of truth-telling, refusing silence.
And building on that fight for women's rights, Elizabeth Cady Stanton's Declaration of Sentiments from Seneca Falls. It's like a legal indictment. She lays out this history of repeated injuries and usurpations on the part of man toward woman, aiming for an absolute tyranny over her. And the list of specific grievances is just staggering.
It's meticulously crafted, deliberately echoing the Declaration of Independence to show the severity of the oppression. Stanton details how women were denied the vote, forced to obey laws they had no hand in making, how in marriage a woman became civilly dead, no property rights, not even to her own earnings.
Her husband essentially became her master.
Legally, yes. Able to take her liberty, even discipline her. And beyond marriage, she points out how women were systematically shut out of professions, theology, medicine, law, the avenues to wealth and distinction. It's a comprehensive, damning picture of systemic inequality designed to demand action.
It paints such a clear and, frankly, infuriating picture of that society.
Yeah.
And Susan B. Anthony carried that torch, didn't she? Pushing women to become a balance of political power. She saw the vote as absolutely non-negotiable.
Completely essential. She wanted that 16th Amendment, as she called women's suffrage, moved into the arena of thinking legislative brains. She even used the example of the powerful whiskey ring winning in the 1874 elections, arguing it happened because women who had a strong interest in temperance and social reform were denied the vote.
Her point being that without women's voices, societal problems festered.
Exactly. She pointed out that every saloon keeper, every drunkard, even paupers and criminals got a vote, while educated, responsible women were silenced. It was a powerful argument linking suffrage directly to the health of society itself.
Of course, this fight for equality runs just as deep, if not deeper, in the struggle for racial justice. Frederick Douglass's speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" It's like a moral sledgehammer against American hypocrisy. Hearing the mournful wail of millions while the nation celebrates freedom. His line, "The character and conduct of this nation never looked blacker to me than on this 4th of July." It's just gut-wrenching.
It's an absolutely searing critique delivered on the nation's birthday. Douglass doesn't hold back. He details the horrors of the internal slave trade men and women reared like swine for the market. He talks about the human flesh jobbers driving chained gangs of people, families ripped apart from Virginia to the auction blocks in New Orleans. He forces his audience to confront the brutal reality behind the celebration.
And he doesn't just describe the horror, he exposes the incredible contradiction, the inconsistency at the heart of America at the time.
He hammers that point home. He calls out the flagrantly inconsistent politics and religion. America condemns tyrants abroad, welcomes foreign refugees with open arms, celebrates their fight for liberty, but then turns around and hunts down its own people seeking freedom. He highlights the absurdity of shedding tears for Hungary's fight for liberty while enforcing the strictest silence about the millions enslaved within America's own borders. It's a masterful use of rhetoric to expose a profound moral failing.
Shifting from these powerful voices of protest to principled leadership within the system, Theodore Roosevelt's idea of a square deal was pretty radical for its time, wasn't it? Not just fair play under the present rules, but changing the rules themselves.
It was quite progressive. He wanted rules changed so as to work for more substantial equality of opportunity and a reward for equally good service. He wasn't afraid of using government power to achieve that.
He advocated for government control over big business.
Thoroughgoing governmental control, yes. Not to crush business, but to ensure fair play for everyone involved: workers, smaller competitors, investors, the public. He saw strong oversight as essential for both national prosperity and social justice. He believed they went hand in hand. If the rules favored the powerful few, the rules needed fixing.
And Roosevelt also spoke out strongly against lynching, right?
Yeah.
Recognizing the deep moral damage it caused.
He expressed gravest alarm about it, especially noting how the mob often focused more on the victim's color than the alleged crime. He called lynching a loosening of the bands of civilization and warned about the moral deterioration it caused in children who witnessed or knew about it, creating more trouble for the future. It was a courageous stance from the presidency, acknowledging the corrosive effect of racial terror.
Fast forward again to a more recent figure known for principled action within the legal system, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Interestingly, despite her groundbreaking work, she favored measured motions in changing the law. She worried that big, swift changes, doctrinal limbs too swiftly shaped, might be unstable.
It reflects a really strategic, long-term view of legal and social change. She famously thought Roe v. Wade, for instance, was maybe too much too soon.
Really?
She felt it fueled the political firestorm, partly because it didn't center enough on women's equality, a woman's ability to control her reproductive life as critical to equality. She believed judges weren't meant to be platonic guardians issuing final decrees from on high. They were part of a dialogue with other branches of government and with the people. Her approach was often about building consensus, making incremental changes that would stick, rather than potentially provoking backlash with sweeping rulings. It connects to that idea Lockwood expressed: we shall never have equal rights until we take them. Ginsburg seemed focused on building the solid legal ground from which those rights could be effectively taken and held.
That makes sense, building a solid foundation for lasting change. But taking principled action, speaking truth to power, often comes at a huge cost. Kurt Vonnegut tells that tragic story of Ignaz Semmelweis.
Oh, Semmelweis. It's heartbreaking. He figured out why so many women were dying from childbed fever in hospitals. Doctors weren't washing their hands after doing autopsies. His solution was incredibly simple: hand washing. Saved countless lives.
But the medical establishment?
They were outraged, they felt insulted, they ridiculed him, resisted him fiercely. He was eventually driven out of his job, out of Austria. He basically gave up on humanity, Vonnegut says. His life-saving discovery was rejected because it challenged existing practices and professional ego. It's a chilling example of resistance to uncomfortable truths.
It's terrifying how often the messenger gets shot, isn't it? Even someone as revered now as Martin Luther King Jr. faced incredible difficulties, didn't he? Even after the I Have a Dream speech.
Theodore Shaw points that out clearly. The period right after that speech wasn't some easy victory lap. It included the Birmingham church bombing that killed 4 little girls, the murders of civil rights workers. The movement itself was deeply roiling and divided. King faced many detractors. It's a vital reminder that principled stands are almost always fraught with danger, setbacks, and intense opposition, even for figures we now see as heroic. History smooths the edges, but the reality was incredibly tough.
And J.K. Rowling gives us that very personal perspective on the privilege of being able to speak out at all. She reflects on being lucky to live where she had legal rights, a fair trial, contrasting it with regimes where a mother could be executed just for her son's outspokenness.
That really grounds the discussion, doesn't it? It highlights the immense courage required when basic safety and due process are completely absent. It underscores the value and the fragility of the freedoms many of us take for granted.
Absolutely. And maybe a good place to wrap up this theme is with Zig Ziglar's mother's advice, which he shares. It's so simple but so profound. It's not who's right that is important, it's what's right.
That cuts right to the core, doesn't it?
It does. And the follow-up. The person who won't stand for something will fall for anything. It's just this perfect encapsulation of moral clarity, of the need for conviction and courage in a world that often pulls us in confusing directions. Hashtag outro. Okay, that was quite a journey we took today, wasn't it? We really covered a lot of ground, spanning centuries, disciplines, diving into such diverse views on, well, on how to live, how to succeed, how to make an impact.
We really did. From Conwell's surprising call to find wealth honestly and recognize those acres of diamonds right in front of us.
All right, the opportunities we overlook.
To that deep dive into our inner world. You know, the power of mindset with Robbins, the absolute necessity of vulnerability with Brené Brown, the search for meaning even in suffering with Frankl and Weissel.
And then shifting outwards again, looking at influence. From Aristotle and the foundations of rhetoric, the importance of character, to Cynic's modern take on communicating your WAY. And finally, landing on those powerful, often incredibly difficult stories of principled action. Sojourner Truth, Douglass, Roosevelt, Ginsburg, people challenging the status quo, sometimes at immense personal risk.
It's amazing how these threads connect, though, isn't it? Even across such different sources, whether it's a 19th century minister, an ancient Greek philosopher, a modern researcher, or a civil rights icon, you see these recurring themes.
Yep.
The power of perception, the importance of inner conviction, the need for ethical communication, the courage to act on your values.
They really do offer these pathways, these insights for navigating our own lives, our own challenges, hopefully with a bit more clarity and purpose. It's a real privilege to get to explore these ideas together.
It is. And, you know, as Tony Robbins said, and I'm paraphrasing slightly here, the only people who don't change their minds are, well, those who can't and those who are no longer with us. This deep dive, I hope, presented perspectives that maybe nudge us all to question some assumptions. So thinking about everything we've touched on today, that duty to find opportunity, the power of your inner state, the art of influence, the courage of principled action, maybe the final thought for you listening is this. What deeply held belief about success or influence or maybe even justice are you willing to re-examine or perhaps even change now that you've explored these diverse acres of diamonds with us?
That's a great question to ponder. We really encourage you to take these themes, notice how they show up in your own life and the world around you. See where the connections lie for you. Thanks so much for joining us on this deep dive.
We'll catch you next time.